We are going to kick off episode 615 with the song Big Kahuna Burger. It is from the album Play Big Kahuna Burger and Other Tasty Treats by the band The Denton Tarantinos. They're a surf band based out of, Denton, Texas. And you can find them at the dentontarantinos.bandcamp.com or look them up on Facebook and check out their entire album, check out what they're up to, and let them know that you heard about them here on the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. I'm talking about Monster Kid Radio, and I'm your writer, host, producer, Derek M. Cook, and I'm excited this week to share with you, well, I'll get to that here in a second. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who has reached out to me regarding the upcoming wedding. We've had some more stuff come in from our wedding registry over on Amazon, which you can find at tinyurl.com/MKR Wedding Registry. Of course, the link will be in the show notes. I just want to say thank you. We have been just slammed with stuff from y'all, and, I appreciate it. I really do. I know that personally I've been on a journey with Monster Kid Radio from the very beginning. I've been pretty open and honest with everybody about everything going on in my life and, my relationship status, and when I started dating Beth and then fell in love with Beth and then proposed to Beth, and, as of this recording in 4 days actually, now that I looked at the calendar, in 4 days she's going to be my wife. And I'm just so excited and happy and lucky and thrilled that y'all have been in my corner, kind of rooting me on and supporting me. And it also helps that Beth is adorable, is totally into this stuff. She designs haunted houses, for crying out loud, and that y'all have been just accepting of her coming onto the show, being part of my life, making me incredibly happy, and all the super cool stuff that we have planned. I know y'all are along for the ride. Thank you so much for the wedding gifts, the cards, the messages on Facebook or by text or by email or whatever. Just thank you. Also, big thanks to Steve Turek. Now, he's a fellow podcaster. Before he became a podcaster, he was a friend. He was a irregular, I suppose you could say, as y'all are, irregular here on Monster Kid Radio, but then he became a podcaster as well. He does the DieCast Movie Podcast, and part of that is Hammerama, which is the Hammer podcast that he does with Alistair Hughes. Steve, just has always had my back. And I know that he's got challenges and his own stuff and his own life and everything else going on, but you know what? Big thanks to Steve for taking the time and offering to help by filling in a little bit when I have things going on in my life, whether it's a move or, in this case, a wedding. Steve has created 4 almost complete shows. I mean, I still do the intros and the outros, and we have the segments that are coming in that we're going to talk about here in a second, but Steve has reached out to various people from the pool of Monster Kid Radio irregulars and got them to record with him. So that's what you're going to get this week. Last week we had him with Kenny. This week we've got him with Scott Morris from Disney, Indiana. I've been wanting to have Scott back on the show proper for a long time, but his schedule and my schedule don't always match. I think it's a time zone thing, and just, I'm incredibly busy and have been busy for the past few months getting ready for the wedding, but Steve was able to make it work. So he is joined by Scott Morris this week to talk about the movie Twonky, which I know absolutely nothing about. I think I've seen it once, but that's about it. I am excited because Scott goes full-on Disney mode. Now, he's one of the co-hosts of the Disney Indiana podcast, and I think by Mickey Mouse law, he's got to represent Disney everywhere he goes, or at least on every podcast that he goes on. And he does a whole Disney Connection segment on this episode, which is pretty cool. It's something that he used to do when we used to do our Hammer Films podcast, 1951 Down Place. He'd have the Disney segment. He's got the Disney Connections here, so he's going to go into that, and then he and Steve are going to have a conversation about Twonky, and it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to y'all being able to hear that. Also, I'm looking forward to Kenny's intro to that segment with his recurring segment, Kenny's Look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. And before we get to that, we've got Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review. So why don't we do that now? You want to do it now? Let's do it right now.
C-3PO,
Loki,
Mace Windu,
Dr. Bruce Banner,
Captain Rex,
Venom,
Princess Leia,
Jean Grey,
Darth Maul,
Nick Fury,
Grand Moff Tarkin,
Captain America,
Lando Calrissian,
Cyclops.
What do all these characters have in common?
Well, 2 of them were played by Samuel L. Jackson.
A couple of them were played by Hammer Films veterans Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee.
Come on, guys, you know this.
Well, of course we do, Jessica. Just like Mickey Mouse and Captain Jack Sparrow, they're all now Disney characters. Hello, I'm Tracy of the Disney Indiana Podcast, and my co-host Scott and I enjoy talking about all aspects of the House of Mouse, and that includes their newest properties, Marvel and LucasArts.
We also talk about Disney resorts, the cruise line, theme parks, and whatever else Mickey has to offer.
Which includes movies, Imagineering, video games, and collectibles. You'll never know what we'll decide to talk about.
So check us out at www.disneyindiana.com or do a search for the Disney Indiana Podcast on iTunes, because now we've got a lot more to talk about.
And don't forget about those other quote-unquote Disney characters like, well, Sully,
Fozzie Bear,
Buzz Lightyear,
Link Hogthrob,
Doug,
Janice,
Merida,
Pepe,
Bruce,
Ralph the Dog,
Wally,
The Disney Indiana Podcast. Even after 5 years, we're still miles away from the nearest Main Street, USA. We're not listed on the map, but you can join us at www.disneyindiana.com.
Bela Lugosi's Dracula, Monsters from Under the Sea, Atomic Frankensteins, and Grandpa Monster 2. Classic monster memorabilia vendors, movie and TV stars, signing autographed photos. It's all coming to the Marriott Pittsburgh North, June 16th through the 18th, 2023. It's Monster Bash. Fans who grew up with monster movies in the theater and on TV will descend on the Marriott Pittsburgh North. Hundreds and hundreds of fans. Don't you miss out as fans travel from all over the country to meet, shop, and enjoy classic monster entertainment. Coming to Monster Bash in June, Audrey Dalton, star of The Monster That Challenged the World, and Boris Karloff's Thriller TV shows. Charlotte Austin, who starred in Frankenstein 1970 with Karloff, and Ed Wood's The Bride and the Beast. Lynn Lugosi Sparks, the granddaughter of Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi. Daniel Roebuck, star of countless films, TV's Matlock, and Grandpa Munster in the latest Munsters movie. Plus, he's a super fan and collector of classic monster memorabilia. Beverly Washburn, actress in Spider Baby with Lon Chaney Jr., Thriller, and Disney's Old Yeller. Tom Savini, actor, makeup man, special effects genius, with credits that include Creepshow, Tales from the Dark Side, The Black Phone, and so much more. Pamela Pierce, actress and daughter of the director that brought us The Legend of Boggy Creek. John Russo, co-writer and zombie from the original Night of the Living Dead, the origin of the modern zombie. And Ohio TV horror host legend, the one and only Son of Ghoul, still creeping to TV sets after all these years. Plus Cleveland horror hosts Drac and Countess Carita. Monster Bash is wall-to-wall vendors and a giant horror hotel packed with classic monster movie fans. Don't miss out. 3-day VIP admission is $55 in advance or $60 at the door for all 3 packed days. Single-day admission at the door is $25. It's all at the Pittsburgh Marriott North, Friday through Sunday, June 16th through the 18th, 2023. Get your advanced membership admission online at creepyclassics.com. That's creepyclassics.com. More information is available at monsterbash.us or call 724-238-4317. It's Monster Bash.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Return of Ultraman, Episode 9, Monster Island SOS. Original air date, May 28, 1971. Minami's kindness almost costs him his life when he defies orders so that Go can be with Jiro on his birthday. The friendly superior officer flies to New York to pick up a monster detector, a mission originally assigned to Go, but Captain Kato takes the insubordination in stride and even has a little fun at Minami's expense, until the pilot comes dangerously close to a storm zone and crash lands on an island. A trio of scientists rescues Minami, even salvaging the monster detector, and while tending to his wounds inform the MAT agent that they suspect there is a kaiju nearby. Together, they investigate the island's cave system, and when an earthquake strikes, a sleeping monster is uncovered. The foursome retreats to plan their next move, but Minami falls ill with tetanus. Go, feeling responsible for Minami's plight, flies a medical serum to the island, arriving just in time to witness the emergence of rock monster Dongar. While trying to repel the creature, Go's plane runs out of fuel, and he also crash lands. Barely conscious, Go grasps at the serum container in the wreckage as Dongar lumbers towards him. Will Ultraman see fit to appear? Monster Island SOS benefits from brisk pacing, suspenseful scenarios, and warm interactions between the members of Monster Attack Team. The team chemistry is noteworthy given the amount of bickering and second-guessing that's taken place in earlier episodes. The story feels like a classic Toho special effects film compressed into 25 minutes thanks to the directorial hand of Ishiro Honda, who had recently wrapped 1970s Space Amoeba and was also working on 2 episodes of Tsuburaya's Mirror Man series. Monster Island SOS also marks the screenwriting debut of Masaru Igami, also known as Masaki Inoue, who would immediately go on to become chief writer of the smash hit TV series Kamen Rider and its sequels for nearly 10 years. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
It happens in an amazing castle with a tickle-em-to-death torture chamber and a 500-player piano with 480,000 keys. It's a musical merry-go-round, sparkling with songs and dances, whirling you away to a new world of wonders.
Have a smoke. Have a cigar.
Don't mind if I do.
Something to eat. Something to drink.
Dr. T is sweet on Mrs. C. So is Mr. Z, the plumber, who fixes sinks and knows all the angles.
When the plumber Zabladowski has installed the last sink, I want him disintegrated. Atom by atom.
See the dangerous descent from the sky-high ladder. See the whammy duel between Dr. T and Mr. Z. See the eighth wonder of the cinema world, the startling, daring Wonderama in color by Technicolor.
For centuries, man has searched the heavens for signs of intelligent life. Now, the search has ended.
What you are about to see is top secret.
Ken Berry.
Plain incredible!
McLean Stevenson.
Holy mackerel.
Harry Morgan.
We're up against genius.
Sandy Duncan.
Oh, swell.
Who is the pilot?
It's Walt Disney Productions. The Cat from Outer Space. Rated G. It's littering theaters with laughter everywhere.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at famous monsters of Filmland.
Ladies and gentlemen, we bring you a strange story about a thing out of space. It may frighten you, it may amuse you, but this may happen to you tomorrow.
Today's film, Twonky, was not featured in Famous Monsters, but its star, Hans Conried, was mentioned at the time of his passing in this brief obituary from FM 185, July of 1982. Veteran character actor Hans Conried died on January 5, 1982, at the age of 64. He starred as Carrie in The Twonky, the tale of an entity from the future which inhabits a television set. Also in 1952, he starred as Ben Ali in The Siren of Baghdad. In 1953, Conried played the title role of Dr. Turek in the fantasy classic The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. In 1957, he challenged the monster that challenged the world as Dr. Rogers. Conried was the voice of the owl in The Magic Fountain and also lent his distinctive voice to the animated film The Phantom Tollbooth, the telefilm of Tolkien's The Hobbit, and Fairies, a televised animated short. Conried starred as Professor Whatley in Disney's The Shaggy DA in 1976 and was Dr. Heffel in The Cat from Outer Space, 1978. He also was featured as Dr. Barnes in Oh God, Book 2, with George Burns. In the 1981 telefilm Through the Magic Pyramid, Conried played I. On television, Conried appeared in the Lost in Space episode The Questing Beast as Sir Sagramonte in 1967 and the Nightly Murders episode of Kolchak, the Night Stalker in 1975. In 1978, he was the voice of the Source in a Star Wars spoof on the sci-fi comedy series Quark, entitled May the Source Be With You. Conried also appeared in 3 episodes of Fantasy Island since 1979. That is all for this week's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. We will have more next time. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
An upheaval of nature tears loose a creature out of the nightmare of time. Spawned by an earthquake on the bed of the ocean, a reptilian, earth-shaking beast of the sea. The monster that challenged the world.
My tank.
What's wrong?
Blake's tank is caught in the undergrowth.
God! What happened?
Oh my God, his body. He died right in front of me. I couldn't help him. I better go back.
Talk sense. What's down there?
I don't know. I never saw anything like it before.
It's the size of a dinosaur, and 10 times more terrifying, hurling the horrors of the unknown at every living thing. Monster of the age.
Follow Butch Patrick on a fantastic trip through the Phantom Tollbooth, where nothing is real but your imagination. To Dictionopolis, where words are weird.
Words in a word are fantastic. You can hint them, you can say them, you can print them, you can pray them, emphasize them, and despise them.
Digitopolis, where figures are freaky.
Numbers can be added to, subtracted from, divided into, multiplied by, crossed out, and erased.
Climb the mountains of ignorance, where dreams become nightmares.
We have nothing to worry about.
And the monsters are magnificent.
It's the gelatinous giant.
Pass through the Phantom Tollbooth and into the magic world of your mind. Rated G.
Hello, everybody. This is Steve subbing in for Derek again on Monster Kid Radio, the show where everybody just loves talking about classic monsters, classic films, or not so classic films. And Derek, of course, with his wedding coming up and other things happening, asked me if I could help him out with some episodes to fill in the gap while he's going through those fun, life-changing experiences and planning. And I've reached out to several people, and one of the people I had to reach out to is my personal favorite guest on Derek's show. I've said this every time when people ask me, who's your favorite guest when it's on Derek's show? Scott Morris, the chief minion of Monster Kid Radio. How you doing today, Scott?
I have no complaints.
I knew you were going to go there.
I had to.
If you would enough, I would have. I have no complaints. That's how Derek got us to do this, because we have these twonkies that just hit us with this beam, and we're like, I have to do Monster Kid Radio.
That's right. I'm doing real well. It's been a while since I've actually been on Monster Kid Radio. I'm glad to be back. I really need to sit down with Derek sometime and get back on there with him as well.
Yeah, I know, because of schedule changes and things like that with his new work and stuff. You guys had trouble, and that was one of the reasons I was like, I got to reach out to Scott, because it's been way too long for Scott to be on Monster Kid Radio. You were a fixture of the show, just like Chris McMillan. You two guys are like the two OGs of guest hosts.
Well, thank you. I've done a lot with her, because I was on his previous show too, Mailer Zombie, and I also produced the pre-show for his Monster Kid Radio streams on Saturday. And I dearly hope that comes back, because I kind of miss putting those together.
And you're also, excuse me, you're also 1951 Down Place.
That's true. And that has bantered around coming back a couple times. Unfortunately, I don't think our third co-host at the time, Casey, or his kidney stone, really want to come back to the show. But Derek and I have talked a couple times about maybe bringing it back as a special episode, maybe on Monster Kid Radio. Just one time, we're going to do a Hammer one. It's going to be 1951 Down Place. So we'll see. Nothing has been solidified yet.
Yeah, it's because 1951 leaving, that's where Alistair Hughes and I decided to fill in the gap, because it'd been like several years with Hammerama, to give people some Hammer fixes.
Yes, and if those out there haven't listened to that podcast, you need to do yourself a favor and tune in. It's a good one.
Oh, thank you. We both have a lot of fun. And before we get into the movie Twonky, Derek always does the classic five. As listeners know from the prior two movies, depending on what order Derek puts these out, this should be the third one. But then again, it could be the first one. I don't know. Instead of asking classic five questions, I'm asking questions that are more tailored to the person who I'm guesting with, just to give a little change of pace from that. And because you are known as the chief minion, and I'm a minion, who do you think is the best monster movie minion?
The best monster movie minion?
Yes.
It's got to be Renfield.
And why?
Oh, Dwight Fry is amazing to watch. He's always doing something when you see him on the screen in that film. And he kind of steals the story away from Dracula when you see him. So I've got to go with Dwight Fry.
I just wish that they would have came out this movie Renfield that are coming out now earlier on, where Dwight Fry could have been playing Renfield in this movie Renfield that's coming out later this year with Nicolas Cage as Dracula.
I'm actually looking forward to seeing what Nicolas Cage does. I don't know if he's going to go full on Nicolas Cage or if he's going to tone it down, but I'm interested. I'll definitely be going to see that one.
I'm all in. I saw the trailer. I'm all in for it. But it would be interesting if you can imagine Dwight Fry being put in there in that role with the way he would run it. That would be something that'd be cool to see.
Yeah, that would be very fun to see.
Now, the next few questions are going to be Disney related, because as we all know, you are one of the co-hosts with your wife Tracy for Disney Indiana, All Thing Disney podcast, with Disney, Marvel, everything Disney related. You guys have been covering
Star Wars, the parks.
Oh yeah, forever. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time. How many years has it been now?
If it hasn't gotten to 15 years, it's really close. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, so we're talking a long, long time, listeners. Who's the best Disney movie minion? Staying with that minion theme.
The best Disney movie minion. That's a good question. I really liked Eddie Murphy in Mulan. Oh.
He did a great job playing that dragon.
Oh yeah, he was great, and that's probably who I would say was my favorite. Second banana type creature. I mean, I also liked Mike Wazowski, because I always think in Monsters Inc. that Sully's the lead guy, and Mike is his minion, his support staff, whatever. So it'd have to be either Eddie Murphy or Billy Crystal in those movies as a second banana.
Okay, I can go.
I mean, I really love how Mike, like every time that he's all happy about being in pictures on magazines and stuff, and he always has some sort of sticker or something over his face. It just cracks me up every time.
I can't argue with either one of those. So, I mean, they're both good. Now, being an expert of all things Disney, what do you think is the best Disney type monster movie, or monster, I should say? The best Disney monster.
Well, again, I'd have to go. The first thing that jumps to my mind is pretty much the entire cast of Monsters Inc. They're not what they're not. They're played more like regular people, and at the beginning they have to scare the kids to get the power, and then they switch over to laughter as you go through. But I love every single monster in the variety of the different monsters that you see all through that film. So that's probably one of my favorites.
As I said, there's more monsters there probably in virtually any film or most films, except if you just count zombie movies, which sometimes will have tons and tons with the Horde. For me, I would go back to Fantasia with the
Chernabog.
Yes, that to me is my favorite. Just because of the imagery, the music, and the way it goes. It's just something when I never seen it when I was really young. It just stays with you, and that one has still stays with me. Still scares me, and knowing the classic monster history connection, it works really well.
I love the scenes with Chernabog, but what always stuck with me all my life is the floating characters, the ghost, or I can't remember if they're ghosts or skeletons that float around while he's in his scenes. But then if I'm going to go with skeletons, I got to go back to the original skeleton dance. Oh. I love watching that. Those skeletons and how they play xylophones on each other at different points, and they just kind of dance around. It's one of my favorite Disney shorts with monsters. And then, of course, I've got to go with my all-time favorite short, and that's Runaway Brain.
Runaway Brain? I haven't seen that one, I don't think.
You haven't seen? Oh, yes. He gets his brain transplanted, and he turns into a giant rampaging creature, and he actually sees Minnie, and he keeps going, Minnie. But yeah, it was from the early 80s, I think. But it's a short where Mickey gets a brain transplant. I'm trying to remember the name of the doctor, but it's voiced by the guy that did Frasier.
Oh, Kelsey Grammer?
Why can't I remember? Kelsey Grammer. Yeah, he plays the mad doctor that does the transplant.
Oh,
if you haven't seen Runaway Brain,
that's good voice acting casting right there. Getting Kelsey Grammer to play mad doctor.
Yeah, definitely check that out because there's a great scene in there where they parody The Exorcist as well.
So running with, what was it called? What was it called again?
Oh, Runaway Brain.
Runaway Brain. I'm just trying to remember.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, I
actually have a poster of it hanging in my house.
Of course you do. Nobody's shocked that there's a Disney poster hanging in your house, and it's going to be a Disney poster, probably something like this, which most Disney fans would not have, but knowing you, it perfectly matches in. Because you're talking about a movie with horror elements, science fiction elements, and Disney elements, which is kind of like the triple whammy for you.
That's my sweet spot.
And speaking of your sweet spots are science fiction. And this movie we're going to be talking about is science fiction. But before we get to that movie, what's the best Disney sci-fi movie?
Black Hole.
Oh, I agree with you. The Black Hole is just perfect.
I love the Black Hole. Yes. I know that what Disney was trying to do when they conceived of it was to compete against Star Wars, and it's nothing like Star Wars. But it's a lot more of horror elements to it. But then again, now that I've said Star Wars and Star Wars is Disney, should I have said Star Wars is my favorite Disney sci-fi?
Well, I
actually have a Stormtrooper outfit.
Well, I think if you go by when they came out, Star Wars was not part of Disney at that time. I think I'll give you a pass on I'm fighting against Star Wars and New Hope. I would only count the Star Wars movies that have come out since they've been a Disney property, and say there's your out for you.
If I'm limited to Star Wars since Disney came out, taking out the Bad Batch and Mandalorian, Black Hole beats all of it.
There you go.
In my opinion.
I'm just giving you an out, so that way you don't have to worry about headcanon fighting yourself about which one's better.
But yeah, I do enjoy the Black Hole quite a bit, and it is a lot darker than you think it's going to be.
Now, this next question could be very easy or very tough, depending on how you answer it. What is your favorite stuffed with character plush that your wife Tracy makes or has made?
That is a tough question. I mean, she's made some for me that she's never, like for this. Have you watched Sven Tooney, the show on MeTV after Sven Gooney?
I've never seen Sven. I don't have MeTV.
Okay. There's a character called Sven Tooney that it's a show. It leans more towards Mystery Science Theater 3000 than Sven Gooney. He pretty much shows the movie, but then he'll have a little drop-ins where he'll do a song about them or give you the background of them. Sven Tooney will take a movie, edit it down to maybe 15, 20 minutes, just giving you the highlights, but then he'll talk over it and do different things. And I think it's a fun show. And so this past Christmas, she made a Sven Tooney for me, one that she's never sold or anything. And I have it right next to I have it. She made me a Sven Gooley. She made me a Sammy Terry, which was a horror host that I grew up with in central Indiana. And she also made me an Elvira. So I'm partial to the horror host characters that she's made for me.
I've gotten a few stuffed with characters from your wife, and my favorite one right now is Ms. Minute. I just love Ms. Minute. I loved Loki, and Ms. Minute fits her, and she did such a great job with Ms. Minute. That was just like, I think you got one too, because I suggested it, and she made two, and she let me pick first. It was I kind of felt bad. I was like, I got to pick before her husband. I was like, man, she's tough.
Loki has been my favorite of the Disney Plus Marvel shows. I was a big fan of Loki, and I like Miss Minutes quite a bit.
See, and my favorite Disney minion would be right now, Miss Minute.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good choice.
But the beauty of it is, ask somebody a different day, it's a different answer, because that's the fun part about these things.
Yep. I'm hoping somehow Miss Minutes comes back in Loki season 2, because I like that character quite a bit.
I can't imagine her not coming back, so she better be back, or I'm going to be upset. There's no way around it. I'm going to be upset if there's no Ms. Minute.
The one thing that could see her not coming back is if they jump around time quite a bit. Which, have you seen Quantum Mania?
Yes.
The post-credit sequence.
Yes.
It looks like they're going to be jumping around the time.
Well, Ms. Minute
and
can
that
jump
makes
too.
me worried that maybe, hopefully, but we'll just have to wait and see.
That's all will be unveiled as time goes on. And for those wondering, you can get a stuffed with character by going to Facebook with the stuffed with character page, what Tracy does, and you can look at the different characters that she's made. And if she has not made one that you want, like I've asked her before, like with Ms. Minute, she'll customize it for you, send you a picture of it, a drawing to see if it's fitting what you want, and then she'll make it for you and then send it to you for a price that's very reasonable. And that kind of stuff. So you can get custom made ones. You can get ones that are already made already. Stuffed with character on Facebook now.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing she'll ask from you, if you want to do a custom character, is help her find a couple of pictures of the character, and then opens it up. Like one of the commissions she just got at the Hall of Heroes Comic-Con was somebody's custom characters that they have drawn. And so it doesn't have to be something that's in pop culture or anything. If you've designed your own character and you want to see it in a plush form, she could work with you on that too.
Well, that's something that's good to know, because I know there's a lot of comic artists out there and comic creators that this is a way for them to have it, especially if they're having a table at a different convention or whatever. If they can get a plush or two, they can have people see that, even if they don't intend on selling them. It draws the eyes over to it.
Yep.
Cool. Now, hopefully, listeners learn more about you and things that you like, and get a better idea what Scott Morris is about. Though, having said that, you've been in like 50 bajillion episodes. I think they pretty much have an idea if they've listened to the back catalog at all. Who is Scott?
Yeah, they're
Morris?
probably like, "Oh no, not him again."
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. It's you haven't been on there for a while, so some people you're brand new.
True.
They're not going to realize you're a used car. They're going to think you're a brand new car.
That's very true. It has been a while since I've been on here. Trying to remember the last movie I did with Derek, and it might be The Black Cat.
Oh, that's been a while. I mean, well, I know who would know. And that's Kenny from Mexico. Kenny from Mexico always seems to know all the little ins and outs of who's been on the show and when and what movies have been covered. I'm sure he's probably saying right now, "Oh, Scott was on this episode." He seems to be the encyclopedia.
I know the Black Cat. I was actually physically in the same room with Derek to record that one, which is odd because he lives on the West Coast and I live in the Midwest. But we actually were together when we recorded that one.
Well, hopefully you guys will have a chance to be together again soon and maybe have time to record something, even if it's a short little bit. That way it'll be there, and hopefully. Maybe you guys could do a trip or two on occasion to 1951 Down Place, maybe one a year, two a year. I would want more, but hey, whatever you guys can fit in with your schedules, because you guys are busy guys. That's why I want to thank you again for helping me out.
I was going through my old recordings and found my intro to when I did the news segment on his Monster Kid Radio the other day. It was fun to listen to that again. I don't think he'll ever go back to doing a zombie show again, though.
Well, you never know. Some things could come back.
You never know.
Zombies are known to come back from the dead.
True.
But that's not
Very
what we're
true,
here
but I think he had his fill of them for a while.
That is true. But sometimes, distance makes the heart grow fonder. And the farther you go away from something, the more likely you are to return. And again, it could be like with 1951. It could be just like a one-off once a year or something like that. Who knows? We're throwing stuff his way. We don't know what his plans are. So,
true.
But I do know we're going to be talking about Twonky, the 1953 sci-fi comedy. And you picked this out, Scott. I'd never heard of this movie at all. It is its 70th anniversary year. It's in public domain.
Yep.
Why'd you pick it?
It was an independent film. Why did I pick it? I saw this movie ages ago. It was late at night, Turner Classic Movies type thing. And this movie came on, and I saw that Hans Conried was in it. And for those that don't know that name, he was the voice of Captain Hook on Disney's Peter Pan. And I'm like, I know that name. I'm going to watch this movie just to see what it's like. And just, it, as you said, it is a comedy. It's more of a comedy, but it's also very sci-fi. And it also has, to me, it feels like an extended episode of The Twilight Zone. I don't know if it's because of the little bit of lightheartedness or the fact that it's black and white or what. I don't know, but it always felt like a Twilight Zone episode to me, and I'm a big fan of the original Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it did feel like a Twilight Zone episode to me, and I do know it was based off a short story, and I think...
Yes, from 1942.
Yeah, from 1942, and I'm thinking, having seen the movie, I think that's one of the things I can ding it on. I think it was stretched too long. But I mean, I'm not saying it takes away from the enjoyment, but I think it would fit better as a 45-minute or an hour, because I saw an hour and 11-minute version, but it says in the thing that there's an 84 minutes on Wikipedia, but I've yet to find an 84 when I was like looking around for it. So what length of time is it? Is it 71 minutes or is it 84 minutes?
I was going to say the version I watched was 71 minutes. That's the only one I've ever seen.
Yeah, I kept looking for a longer one because Wikipedia had it longer, and I found one that was longer, but the last 11, 12 minutes of it were just repeating scenes from earlier in the movie and after the end credits. So I think it was just somebody. I think that's where somebody got the time. That was on archive.org. Had the longer version, but it's really an hour and 11-minute movie.
Now, when you were searching for the older version, did you stumble upon the radio play that was done before the movie?
No, I did not. I think I saw it, but I didn't listen to it. Did you listen to it?
Yes, I did. It's a little bit closer to the original story because, like we said earlier, the story was written in 1942. That's before TVs were more commonplace, and so the original story is a console radio. That is the Twonky, and the radio. Yeah, there's a technician that somehow falls through time back to present day, the 40s, and he arrives in a radio manufacturing plant. And he sees these things, and they look exactly like the Twonky that he makes in the future. That is just supposed to help you out, do different things for you. So he starts working and builds a Twonky, and then he gets sucked back into his own time, but that Twonky stays there and gets sold to a college professor, but it's a console radio. And there's a lot of the same gags that you see in this movie coming from the radio, like lighting of the cigarettes and other things. But it was originally a radio. And like we said earlier, the story is based, it was written by actually a married couple. Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore. They wrote it under their joint pseudonym of Louis Pageant, which I thought was interesting because Louis and Pageant were the maiden names of both of their mothers. That's how they came up with that name.
Oh.
And to bring this a little bit back to Derek's love, the two met as part of the Lovecraft Circle, which is a group of writers and fans who actually corresponded with H.P. Lovecraft. And in fact, Henry Kuttner added several stories and creatures to the Cthulhu mythos in his writings. So we can bring this back to what Derek likes.
That is just weird. I didn't know it had that Lovecraftian connection with it. I'm sure Derek now probably wishing that. I'm sure Derek's going to end up watching this movie thinking there's got Lovecraft connections in the movie. Don't think there is in the movie, but but I'm not a Lovecraft expert, so there could be something that's going on that people could say, "Oh, well, Steve, with this little scene here, it could be beyond me." I mean, Derek would know way more than I if this has any connections besides what you brought up.
Yeah, I don't remember any in the movies, but just for those that are really into H.P. Lovecraft, Kuttner, he actually added to the mythos. He added Lod, the secret of Perliz, I think is pronounced. Vorvadas, the eater of souls, and a couple other characters. But this he wrote with his wife.
That's pretty impressive, and of course it's kind of interesting what they shared the pseudonym, and people probably thought it was one person at the time instead of two.
Yep. And the movie, like I said, it was first a radio program, and then it was in an independent made movie. It was actually made in 1951, and it took them 2 years to get distribution. So it sat on the shelf for 2 years before United Artists agreed to make it or to release it.
Yes. And it's an interesting movie, and if you want to give people an idea roughly what it's about, so they know, because I think most of our listeners are going to be like myself and have never heard or seen this movie before.
Well, Hans Conried plays a college professor, and his wife is getting ready to leave to help her sister through childbirth. So she was going to leave for a while, and she decided to buy one of these new TVs so her husband would have something to do while she's gone. So the TV shows up, and it's not quite a TV. It's sort of a sentient being that tries to help him out. It kind of overhears a lot of the things that the wife says before she leaves, like don't drink too much coffee and things like that. So after she leaves, I'm trying to remember his character name. His last name's West.
Terry West.
Hans Conried's character. Yes. He sits down at the table because he has to write a lecture, and he goes and gets out a cigarette, and a electronic beam flies out of the TV and lights the cigarette for him. And of course, that kind of freaks him out a little bit, and he puts that away and puts out another one, and it does it again. And then it actually does it to a pipe as well. And he starts really freaking out. So he leaves the room where the TV is, goes into the kitchen, pour himself a cup of coffee. The TV follows him. It's one of these old style TVs that has four what look like wooden legs. So they kind of puppet it around, and it follows him and shoots the coffee mug right out of his hand. Like, you're not supposed to be drinking coffee. And there's all these different things where it's trying to help him, but then it's really kind of starting to run his life.
Yep.
Won't let him read certain books to help with his research. There's a scene where the people that he bought the TV from show up to get their first payment, which is like $100. and the TV magically creates a bunch of $100 in $5 bills on the floor to pay off that debt. But as it goes farther in, you find out that the police are after him because it just copied one $5 bill. So there's counterfeiting issues going on. There's a woman that shows up that she's kind of like a bill collector trying to come up with money for some other purchases his wife had made. And the TV's trying to protect him, but he doesn't want the TV to protect him anymore. He's starting to get freaked out about it. He calls in his best friend, who is the football coach for the university. And this is where the name Twonky comes up, because the football coach says when he was young, anything that you didn't understand was a Twonky. And they were trying to do a experiment to see if the TV would protect West. So the football coach goes to kick him, and a bolt comes out of the TV and paralyzes the football coach's leg. And so he ends up staying in the house for a while because he can't walk. But like I said, it really sort of feels like a Twilight Zone episode, with this Twonky kind of taking over West's life.
Yep. And the football coach, Billy Lynn, plays Coach Trout. I remember when I read the synopsis of this before we did it, where it says the football coach and his players come to help Professor West with the Twonky. And I'm like, how in the world does a professor, a football coach, and a football team all get involved in the same thing? And this football coach is not your typical football coach. He's had 6 seasons where he's yet to win a game, but he has the first mortgage on the stadium. So that's why they can't fire him.
So they can't fire him.
He doesn't really seem to know a lot about football, because he's talking about stuff. Is that this or that? But he's this philosopher, scientist, psychologist, home brewer.
He's sort of an amateur in all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
He dabbles and reads stuff in it, and he thinks he can solve Kerry West's problem with this thing.
Yeah. So he's total opposite image of what I was expecting for the football coach. And I think that's what the humor they were going for. They were going for this intellect person, who's like, oh, don't rule this out. It could be this and this and this. And it was just kind of funny how he played him. He was probably my favorite character.
When he and Hans Conried were on the screens at the same time, I was loving this movie, because the interaction between those two was great. I mean, there's another character later on in the movie, an English woman who's driving, which I liked her character too. She has the God-given right to be wrong.
And it was very eccentric. Very eccentric.
Yes. I liked her too, but like you said, the coach was probably my favorite character too. But especially when he and Kerry West or Hans Conried were interacting. Oh yeah, they had definitely good chemistry together. And this was Hans Conried's first time being a leading man in a movie. Yes. And of course, everybody knows him for lots of movies. I remember him from The Monster That Challenged the World and The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. You brought up Peter Pan and that kind of stuff. So yeah, this was before those last two movies, Peter Pan and the Dr. T movie. They actually came out before this movie, because he did them because those came out in 1952. But this movie was the first one, since it was made in 1951. Exactly. I'm just saying, those are movies I know him from. I'm not saying which one he was the leading man, but I just remember him in so many different roles. Well, there's a couple other movies where I know him from, because he's done a lot more Disney than just Peter Pan. Oh yes. He was in The Cat from Outer Space in 1978, and also The Shaggy DA in 1976. But the one thing that I did not know he did, he's a very prolific voice actor. He did a lot of voice stuff. And he was actually in 24 episodes of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends from the early 80s, where he voiced both the Chameleon and the Red Skull. Because Captain America showed up on that cartoon. So he worked with Disney for a long time.
And for listeners...
Even though Spider-Man... Yeah.
Oh, no, you go.
I was going to say, Spider-Man at the time wasn't Disney, but it is now.
Yes, and I was going to say, for listeners that love a show you and I probably both loved growing up, Gilligan's Island. Who can't remember? I mean, every time I've seen his face, you always remember his face, and I always remember Wrong Way. And he was Wrong Way Feldman in 2 of the episodes. I mean, he's everywhere in TV, movies, and always has that voice and that look that, where you don't see it as much in Hollywood nowadays, where you have somebody that has a distinctive voice and look at the same time, where you can spot them in whatever they're in. And he's one of those lucky few that does.
Very much so. He once you see him one time, you know who he is. And once you figure out his name, but you'll see him everywhere.
Oh, exactly. And one of the things I love, because I lived in Baltimore growing up, and he was born in Baltimore and grew up there and in New York City, but he was originally a Baltimore guy. So.
Well, he's not the only actor or actress in this movie that has very strong Disney connections.
Oh, please tell me more.
There's a character in this film, the Lady Bill Collector. She doesn't actually have a name. Played by Gloria Blondell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she was the voice of Daisy Duck, starting in Daisy's second appearance, Donald's Crime in 1945, and she voiced Daisy in 4 other shorts until 1947. She was also the narrator for the 1947 Disney film The Story of Menstruation, which is a kind of a Disney people know that one. It's kind of a movie that surprises ever got made, but it's I think it's the movie that the girls watched when you got separated in middle school. But she would voice the narrator of that. And one other character I wanted to mention is William Phipps. Now, in the movie, he plays one of the members of the football team that visit the coach.
Okay.
When, he went on later to be the singing voice of Prince Charming in 1950s Cinderella.
Really?
Yes.
Well, of course, he didn't get much dialogue in this movie.
Yeah, I don't think he said much in this one. I mean, the coach tells his team to basically go down and try to destroy the Twonky at one point. And you see them all go down to the TV, but you don't see what happens. And then later, when the professor comes home, he sees them all laying across the floor. The Twonkies knocked them all out. And I think each one of them at one point says, "I have no complaints," which is what we referenced earlier when we started this podcast.
Yes,
the TV basically blanks their minds out and calms them down, just sends them off with no complaints.
And that's the thing, because I think there was one player that said something like, "Oh, we're going to do what the coach says," and they go out of the room, and then after that, every one of the players says, "I have no complaints." And if people are able to figure that out to Prince Charming, then more power to them, because obviously they're not even singing it.
Nope.
But I'll give somebody credit. There's always somebody out there that can that can find the most obscure thing, and they remember it, and they're like, and they're able to piece it all together. And that's the great thing about people with their natural sleuthing abilities.
Yep, and that's definitely the coach does a lot of that in this movie. He's trying different things and trying to figure out what a Twonky is, and they eventually correctly say that it's a robot. And the Twonky, one of the things I thought was really ingenious was they bring in another television at one point.
Yes.
And the Twonky tries to save itself by pushing this other TV around in its place. So when they try to take it away, they're going to be taking away the TV, the normal TV, and not the robot. I thought that was clever on the robot's part.
Well, the robot also inadvertently got the Professor West in trouble, but yet got him out of the trouble at the same time. So it's kind of like, and what it was presumed is that the Twonky came from the future and it's somehow came sent to the past. So I guess everything is different now. And of course, as you already referenced, the Twonky caused him to have problems with the IRS because of making all these different bills, counterfeiting.
No, it's the Secret Service.
Oh, the Secret Service. There we go. The Secret Service with the bills. But prior to them showing up, he was already in trouble because the Twonky made a phone call saying that was trying to solicit a person for him to help him have companionship, I guess is the polite way of putting it.
Yes, specifically a woman.
Yes.
He got connected to a couple of phone operators, and he was speaking in his robotic voice, requesting a woman for companionship to come to his master.
Which caused the police to do a raid. And of course, there was no women on the site, and they're going after him like, "Oh, you have a brothel here," and all this stuff. And he's like, "What?
Yep.
And eventually, because
of course, he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and he had no idea. And then eventually, the Twonky takes them all out, and they all wake up saying, "I have no complaints."
And then he gets in trouble again when that bill collector shows up.
Oh,
and
yes.
It's not for the bills on the Twonky; it's for some other things that his wife had opened up lines of credit that maybe she wasn't paying, or it's not really explained too deeply. But this woman, I got the impression she was like a sort of like a bounty hunter, except for bills. And if they couldn't get bill companies couldn't get people to pay, they would send this, people like this to get them. And her method of operation is to just stay in the house until she gets her money. Once she gets in, she's not leaving. I mean, to the point where she's sleeping and showering in the house.
Yeah. And the thing is with her, from what I understood, she spent $500 of her own money to get these uncollected debts. So I think she just took it over because I figured, you give us 500, then if you collect all these debts, you'll get 1,000. I don't know what the total would have been. And every one of them that she had been following, they either moved, it sounds like they're somewhere in Canada, because the city she was mentioning were all in Canada, were dead until she got to him. And it was $86. No, it was 86 cents. It was something like that. It was like $84.86. Whatever. It was less than $100. And it was already established
it was a very
he had no money
number.
on. Yeah. And it was already established he had no money on, and that's what led to the Twonky counterfeiting the $5 for him. And because all he had was $5, and he had it, and it fell out of his pocket, and the Twonky was just replicating it. And so it seems like she's like, I'm not going to leave, because if I leave, you're not going to let me back in. I'm going to stay here till I get the money. And the more inconvenience it caused him, the better. But he came up with an interesting solution.
Well, I was going to say, at first, the Twonky thought that this was the woman that he ordered when he called on the phone. So there was that misunderstanding for a little bit as well.
Well, that is true. Finally, the woman came.
Yes. But yes, he decides that he's going to try to get the Twonky to help him. And the way the Twonky tries to help him actually gets him in trouble with his wife. Because, at one point, the Twonky shoots his beam at this woman, and all you see at first is just a pile of clothes on the floor and a bra come floating down from the ceiling. So you think that you killed her.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. You saw some smoke, or I thought she was vaporized. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I did too. And then his wife comes walking in and is all upset because she just saw a naked woman go running away from the house.
But it didn't take long for her to understand what was going on. You know, when you see a walking TV going around your house, it starts to make everything plausible.
Yep.
The Twonky was not doing a job of trying to stay hidden from people when he was just one-on-one. Like, he'd let the coach see what he's doing, which makes me wonder, would the movie have been a little bit better if it played up that the Twonky was only acting for a while in front of him instead of being so open about it early in the movie? What do you think? Like, would it have more comedy elements if it would have played up the trope of only doing it when he's around, but eventually it starts to do it when other people are around, like later in the movie, instead of having it go right off the bat?
Well, I think that the reason he was doing it in front of everybody is the time that he's from in the future, everybody had one of these Twonkies. So everybody expected that. So he wasn't trying to be stealthy because that's not what he's used to. But to answer your question, yeah, I think it might have been interesting just to watch Hans Conried do a little more of, no, really, it really moves around, you know, trying to convince people of what he's seeing. But if we had done it that way, I think we would have lost a lot of the fun interaction between he and the coach. And I don't want to lose that.
I don't know if we would have lost. I'm just saying held it off for a little bit longer. Like the coach, I think you could have still had the interaction between him and the coach, but it could have been like a little more where it's not doing it in front of the coach, but eventually it does. Because they did do a little bit of that when the police showed up or something, where the Twonky had switched the TV, put the older TV there, and it was playing normal like a TV would. But he figured out that the Twonky was hiding behind something. So the Twonky was doing stealth mode later, but wasn't doing it early on. So that's just nitpicking, just looking at different things and wondering, could that have done this or that? What did you think of the social implications of what the movie was about?
What are you referring to? Well,
the way that the football coach was throwing it out there is that this is a future where the Twonky and these machines like that, because making people think I have no complaints, it was taking away free will because it was when it was projecting things that it wanted the professor to talk about in its lecture. So when the professor was writing his lecture notes, it would send the beam at him and make him change it. Wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do. Wouldn't let him listen to his own music. It was taking over his life completely. And it's kind of, because it came out, it was filmed in 1950. And of course, we all know what everybody was thinking of in the 1950s.
Yeah, the Red Scare. I did get a feeling a little bit of, and it's just going to sound like an odd comparison, but the Terminator, where the robots were in charge and they were keeping humanity in check. And I wondered if that's what was going on in the future where the Twonky is used to. That there's a group of Twonkies that basically run the world and they keep the people in check by, if they start having free thought or whatever, they just zap them into complacency once again.
And then think about how TVs have moved from the 50s to now, or social media, whatever you want to look at it. And now everybody is glued to them. Not everybody, but you know what I mean? Tons and tons of people.
Yes.
And grow up with, and then basically whatever's shown to them must be true and that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting how some of that was, for a short story that came out in 1942, and then in the late 40s, early 50s, written into a screenplay by Arch Oboler, who was the director. And
yes,
it was a lot of this stuff, 70 years later. Remember, this the 70th anniversary, listeners. It has been very much spot on with how things have changed in society.
You just reminded me when you mentioned Arch Oboler that Hans Conried was actually interviewed around 1970, I believe, and he was saying that when he first saw the film, he said the film isn't working that well and it would bomb at the box office. And Conrad said that the producer replied to him, "That's all right. I need a tax write-off this year anyway."
Yes, he did. And it's just, and of course the producer was A.D. Nash Jr. was the executive producer. So it's hard to say which. Arch was also a producer, but I'm not sure which producer was looking for the tax write-off.
I can see where maybe a lot of people, when they first saw this film, leaned more into the comedy aspects of it and really didn't look at a lot of the social aspects that you were talking about. And that's probably why it didn't do as well, because the comedy, while there's some funny moments in it, it's not a laugh out loud funny movie.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot to say about society and an addiction to devices, basically. Everybody stares at their phones. Are you controlling your phone, or is the phone controlling you?
Exactly. And I think this movie is perfectly, analogous to then to now.
Mm-hmm. But having said that, I think it's still a fun movie to watch for some of the comedy bits, and also the work of the football coach and Hans Conried are fun to watch. Oh, and it really, as we said earlier, I think this would have been a good Twilight Zone type of episode.
Oh, I definitely agree.
I got that vibe from it the whole time I watch it.
I definitely agree.
And if you like the Twilight Zone, if you like the Twilight Zone, definitely seek this one out.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you. And one thing I do want us to mention, Edwin Max, who played the television delivery man, because he has a reoccurring role throughout the movie. He keeps coming back in.
Yes.
What did you think of him? I enjoyed him with the way he was, because he's playing the everyman type stuff. And it's because he was the one that's like, I forgot, I need the $100 deposit. And the way he delivered it, his delivery, it was just funny. And then when he came back after being, I have no complaints, and you realize when all these things were happening to him, like he had his wife spill hot coffee on him and he's just smiling about it. It's like, I have no complaints. It's no complaints. And you can see how this would go to these people for the rest of their time, or maybe when the Twonky it gets destroyed, or maybe it's temporary control. I don't know. It makes you wonder what the ramifications were for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't see him at the end of the film to know what happened to him. Are they like vampires? Because if you kill the main vampire, then you're released from the curse.
Well, that is true. It makes you wonder. And there's things that I don't want to spoil, because I don't think a lot of people have seen it. But it's definitely, I agree with you. It's a good science fiction movie with premises and that kind of stuff, how it was designed. I don't think it's a great comedy whatsoever. It has funny moments, but you're never going to be like really laughing out loud. It's not like when people hear comedy, it's not that type, but it is things that'll make you grin here or there, or especially with Han Conried's reactions to different things. As always, he's the consummate character actor, going through and doing this, and he just plays it so well. And with Billy Lynch, as we already said, their chemistry between the two, it's worth. I think for listeners, it's worth. It's on YouTube. It's on archive.org. There's even a colorized version. I didn't watch the colorized because I wanted to see the way it was done. And you can watch, like Scott said, you can listen to the radio version of it to get an idea what it would have been like.
And I would recommend that. Yeah, I would recommend the radio play. It was a fun. I like listening to old time radio shows, and so that was a good one. And it's like I said, it's closer to the book because the Twonky is a radio instead of a TV. The only thing I haven't done is go back and read the original short story, which I kind of do now. I've never read it. It was in the Astounding Science Fiction magazine in 1942. So I'm may try to track that down to read the original story.
If you do find it, let me know if it was good, and if it is, forward me where you found it at, and I'll give it a read through too, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I'm curious. You're always curious to see how things changed over time when it goes to different mediums.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I want to track it down too.
But I'm glad you picked this movie, because this one was not in my wheels. I'm a science fiction lover like you. I think if I had to put these my movie preference and genres in order, I would be science fiction, monster movies, horror movies. Like if I was looking at those three, because that's like kind of Monster Kid Radio deals with a lot. And I'm more of a science fiction guy. And the ones that have science fiction with monsters and a horror element, I'm like, yeah, you got me in all three. When you check all three boxes. And I also love comedies. If you can check all four of those boxes, I'm in hog heaven.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm always worried, especially this one, showing it to people for the first time, because people are either going to like it or not get it. And I think you got it with the social things and everything. So I'm glad you liked it.
I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad that listeners will get to hear about it too, and hopefully seek it out. Like we said, it's readily available. The print the versions you can see are going to vary in quality greatly. The one on archive.org, for the most part, was a decent quality, but it had some parts where it would be a little poorer. I stuck with it because I thought I was watching closer to the 84-minute version, which I was starting to doubt there was an 84-minute version. Yes, Wikipedia does lie. And that kind of thing. Because everything I was looking for on YouTube had these 71-minute versions. And I think you could probably find a really good copy on YouTube. And like I said, I didn't look at the colorized one, but there is a colorized one. But I like to see it the way it was originally meant, because especially if it was filmed in black and white with shadowing and things like that, you lose that in the colorized versions.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of colorized versions of black and white movies.
There's only one.
So I didn't.
There's only one that I like. Babes in Toyland, the Laurel and Hardy one.
I was afraid you were going to say Plan 9.
No. Oh, no. But Babes in Toyland, because it takes place in Mother Goose Land, so to speak. So to me, that was a movie that should have always been in color. But when they go to the Bogey Land, I thought that should have been black and white. So that way it has a difference between the fantastic good area and the bad area. So I thought one, kind of like Wizard of Oz. So one part should have been black and white, one part should have been color. And I think that to me would be the best of the versions, the best way to view the movie. But that to me is the only movie that I've seen in the past that really should be colorized, or should, and it was.
I honestly can't think of any movie that I think needs to be colorized. I do like movies that use color in parts of the movie to emphasize things like How to Make a Monster. I love how at the end it turns into color during the fire and everything.
Or the Tingler with the blood.
The Tingler, yes.
Or like Mighty Joe Young, which I did with Kenny, where you have the lens, when he gets to that end scene with the fire, and it gives that more, so it gives more of that fire, the yellow lens comes on, I think, yellow or orange.
Yep.
And
then there's angry.
That's what I was looking at, tinting.
And the tinting is also used in Angry Red Planet. When you see some of the monsters on Mars, you get that red tint to them.
Exactly. But I want to thank you for joining me and plug your show so people know where to go to learn all things Disney related.
To the Disney Indiana Podcast, which can be found at DisneyIndiana.com. We put out a show every other Sunday, and we talk about Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, the parks, the TV shows, Disney Plus. when we started the show, it was just Disney, and they kept buying more and more IP, so we have more and more to talk about. But it's my wife and I, and we have fun doing it, and it's a fun activity for the two of us to do together.
And if listeners, again, we talked about it earlier, if you want to get a certain figures or whatever, and you want to have a character stuffed for you, you can go to Stuffed with Character on Facebook, and Tracy will make you one that she's already made or customize one like we talked about. All you got to do is drop her a line and go for it.
Yeah, she has pictures on her Facebook page of all the characters, basically all the Universal monsters. You're going to find a lot of Marvel and DC superheroes and some video game characters. One of the favorite ones that I didn't mention earlier, she did a Droppo from Santa Claus Conquers the Martians for me. So she even branches out to some of the genre movies that get talked about here. But she's open to doing anything. If it's not something she already does, if you just get her a couple of pictures of them, she'll work up a sketch, send that to you, and if you approve the sketch, then she'll go through and make the character. And they're little felt characters, 8-9 inches tall, and they have a lot of character, and she loves doing them.
And if you're a little hesitant because you're only seeing pictures and you want to see what they really look like and get that touchy-feely to it, both of you are now have been vendors at the Monster Bash, so they can go to your booth and you can see the work there. She has her book with a lot of the samples of ones that she's done before for people if they want to make a custom order, type thing. And that way you can buy an impulse purchase right there, but you can actually see the work at Monster Bash, and you're also at other conventions now too.
Yep, she just did the Hall of Heroes Comic-Con convention in Elkhart, Indiana, where she mostly did her Marvel and DC characters and sold really well there. And Monster Bash, she'll focus more on monster characters, the Universal monsters and others. So hopefully we could see some of the listeners out there.
And if you do, come by and talk to Scott about podcast that he's on, talk about Monster Kid Radio. You can talk about Disney Indiana. You could talk about just about anything because Scott's an easy guy to get along with, and so is Tracy. Scott, again, thank you for helping me help Derek.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Now I just need to sit down with Derek and try to get on the show proper sometime in the future.
Well, that's just a matter of getting those schedules to merge, and we'll see how everything goes. But it's always tough. As you know, when doing a podcast and other things going on in life, it always makes it interesting when trying to get things planned out. But listeners, I want to thank you for hearing me again, take in for Derek. I'm sorry it's not Derek's voice. I know you'd rather hear him. But hey, I did bring back Scott. So, I mean, you got to give me some credit there. Scott is back.
Of course, big thanks to Steve, Scott, Kenny, and Mark for being part of this week's episode of Monster Kid Radio, pretty much doing the bulk of the work this week. I couldn't have put the podcast out this week without your assistance, without your help, without your companionship, friendship, all of that. Thank you. And thank you, dear listener, for listening to the show. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. Monster Kid Radio has the best podcast listeners out there. That includes you. That's you. You make this happen. You. Yeah. And you know what you can do to make Monster Kid Radio even better is share it with your friends, retweet about it, share posts on Facebook, let people know about Monster Kid Radio, get them coming to the podcast, and send them to our website at monsterkidradio.net. Well, one of these days, I'm going to update the website. It's an old blogger template, but you know what? It's got everything you need to know about the podcast. It's got links to everything that we talked about. It's got links to Mark and Steve and Scott. It's got our feedback information. If you want to be part of the conversation here on Monster Kid Radio, you can email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com. And our voicemail line is over there too, 360-524-2484. There's also links to our Twitch, our YouTube, our Reddit, our Discord, our Patreon, our Team Death YouTube channel. There's a link over there. Team Death is the Derek and Beth, DE for Derek, TH for Beth YouTube channel. So you can find a link to that as well. Please consider liking and subscribing to that. Just everything you need to know. It's all there. If you want to buy a shirt, if you want to help support the show through merch, everything is there, including mention of what's coming up next week. And I can tell you right now that I have another banger of an episode. Banger of an episode? Yeah, no, I'll stick with that. Another banger of an episode next week, because we've got a conversation, again, with Steve Turek. Thank you so much, Steve. And Kevin Slick. You know him from the Monster Bash thing. It's going to be a conversation between the two of them about an incredible movie, one that I don't talk about enough, one that I've been wanting to talk about here on the show for a very, very long time. And at one point, we had things lined up. I was going to have somebody on to talk about the show, and then just, again, life got in the way. It didn't happen. I've been sitting on it. You know what? Steve's like, we're just going to talk about The Invisible Ray with Kevin. So that's what's coming up. Next week, The Invisible Ray, Karloff, Lugosi, Turek, Slick, and you here at Monster Kid Radio. So make sure you come back in 7-ish days for that. I'm going to try to stick to the Thursday release schedule that we're kind of getting back into. But with my wedding on Saturday, please understand, I'm going to be a little busy. After the wedding, we need to finalize moving me from the apartment into the house. And we're trying to make sure that everything's copacetic between the kitties. I got Wednesday. Beth has 2 cats, Juniper and Rex. A couple of big boy kitties. Wednesday, if I see a little girl kitty, trying to get them all to come together into, what do they call that? A clouder of cats? I think that's right. Anyway, keep your fingers and tentacles crossed that I'll be able to get the next episode out next Thursday. And again, thank you for all of your support through all of this, through my relationships, my employment status, which is kind of up in the air right now. If you know of anybody who needs some production work done, I'm your guy. Video editing, audio editing, podcast editing, sound effects for independent film or video production, YouTube editing. I'm your guy. Anyway, thank you for supporting me through all of that. Thank you for supporting me through the engagement and for this upcoming wedding on Saturday. I appreciate each and every one of you from the deepest, darkest depth of my Monster Kid heart. Thank you. Until next week, remember, the Monster Kid Radio is a registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio, LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio, LLC is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 unported license. Of course, that doesn't apply to the song Big Kahuna Burger. That is copyright 2022, the Denton Tarantinos. You can find them at thedentontarantinos.bandcamp.com and check out their entire album. Play Big Kahuna Burger and other tasty treats, or find them over on their Facebook page over at facebook.com/Denton Tarantinos. They actually have a show coming up this Friday, April 7th at Andy's Bar in, well, you guessed it, Denton, Texas. There's a link to the event page on their Facebook page. Again, look up facebook.com/Denton Tarantinos, or just follow the Facebook link from their Bandcamp page. Let them know the Monster Kid Radio sent you. Pick up their album. Throw them some support. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.